Hey, what's going on, everybody? I hope everyone out there is doing well and doing well in their painting. I thought I'd do a nice, simple winter scene here at my desk on my lunch break. So I'm taking the medium hake and I'm working on 100% cotton arches paper, 140 pound. And what I'm going to do this time is, as opposed to the 3 wetting coats, I just wet the paper 3/4 of the way down, just very lightly. And now I'm taking some yellow ochre. You can use raw sienna or yellow ochre. And I'm just creating some strips across that are going to create a little variant of light here. And if you want to break that up or make little changes to it, this is the time to do so. You can use a wet brush, a wet hake or hockey brush, as people keep reminding me it's called. In the U.S., a lot of people refer to it as the Hake brush. So in our little group, we kind of easily refer to it as the Hake brush. So not confuse it with the word hockey. So I've taken some ultramarine blue mixed with just a little bit of Payne's gray, and just starting at the top, making some dark sweeps across from the top, working my way down. We're going to let a little of that yellow ochre sort of ease through the paint just to create some interesting areas of light. What I'm doing now is I'm taking some Payne's gray and adding that to the ultramarine blue. I haven't cleaned my brush. One of the keys to painting is, by the way, is not cleaning your brush and working with paints that are always on your brush, and you get interesting mixes. So the Payne's gray, you'll notice I'm hitting, it's working its way down the sheet, and it's creating some nice cloud formations. As I'm dabbing along, I'm just sort of dabbing the water that's sort of cascading down. If you want a stormy look, then you can leave that go. But while it's wet, you can still kind of dab at it and take that out. And it'll create some smaller clouds coming down the page to give you sort of that graduation, larger clouds at the top and smaller clouds toward the horizon. So now I'm taking the same colors again, going more toward the blue, ultramarine blue, and I'm going to start making some sort of hilly areas here. So now I'm going to come in, I'm coming with a wet brush, and I'm just kind of cleaning up this area just a bit here, and I'm going to start creating some little variations just to give it some dimension. You can see our clouds at the top. We've got some nice light coming through from the yellow ochre. And now I'm bringing in different strengths between the water on the brush and the ultramarine blue. Now you can make whatever shape of the hills you want. You want a little more pointier things showing through. I don't really want mountains here, so I'm just creating some different varieties here. Again, same colors, Payne's gray, ultramarine blue, and you can use a little bit of alizarin crimson if you like. Just working my way through the hills and just creating some shapes, playing while the water is still wet on the page. As this dries, it'll dry in a unique way from the variations of the water that you have. And as you can see now, we're starting to get little slopes. And you can see I'm highlighting that with the brush, just creating some little light areas. And you can now tell it starts to look like hills. Some of this will be, I'm going to have some trees and stuff, so it's going to block some of this. Sometimes I do stuff and then I end up covering up some neat effects that I do. It's just something you have to watch for as you go. So you can take away lifting some of the paint out or wash some of it out with the wetness of the brush. Depends on what you're looking for, if you're looking for, you know, whatever effects that you're looking for. I'm just coming in with some cleaner blue here. It was probably better the way I had it, but as long as it's wet, you can still sort of play. Kind of want it to be darker as it comes nearer to you to get that distant effect, which is what I'm going for here. Now you'll notice we've left the bottom 25% or so of the paper white, and that's where we're going to be utilizing our winter effect. We're not going to use any white here, although I do like to use white for snow. That's why I'm calling this a simple winter scene. You're not going to need any white. We're just going to leave the white of the paper as our snow. And the reason why I've left just that small section is it just leaves us a small amount to work with, so that you're not killing yourself trying to make, you know, a winter scene. It's just enough to you understand mentally when you look at the picture, ah, yes, this is a winter scene. This is that time of year. So now I'm taking some burnt umber. Now this is where we're going to see some differentiation in the winter scene here. If you've ever looked at, you know, when you have snowfall, you have areas that are not hit. You have some browns and different grasses that are popping up and showing through. So just creating some random shapes. Now you have to importantly remember to leave, as you know, enough white so that it makes sense to the viewer that you have snow. So by taking the brush and drying it as much as possible and sort of feathering out the hairs of the brush, you can create some grassy effects. And by pressing that against the paper, you'll see the individual hairs touch the paper and you'll get a grass effect. And you'll notice the upper section of it is dried pretty nicely. We've got some nice hills going, and the cloud formation looks fairly realistic, with some nice light coming through from that yellow ochre. So now I'm just doing some grassier effects here on the bottom. You'll notice we have very little white showing through, and yet it's going to show through as a winter scene. And if you've not done a winter scene, this is probably a perfect starting point. I found winter scenes to be very challenging initially. A lot of times I will use white because I enjoy using the white paint, and I think it really hits home that it's snow. But the real challenge of watercolor, obviously, is leaving the white bits. A lot of people are impressed by that. There's a huge contrast between the paint and the white paper. But if you can do a combination of two and you can have white bits and you can use white paint, I like that too. I'm just taking my finger, and if you have grain on your paper and you rub it with your finger, it'll create almost like a dirty effect, and it can look like shadows or even footprints, or it looks like a lot of things. I think it has a really neat look, especially if you're doing a snow scene. I'm just creating some foliage here, using some burnt umber, and you can use what colors you like. You could even go with some greenery. There's still some green in the wintertime. There's different pines and evergreens and things like that. So I'm just sort of taking my time and creating the foliage here. So what I've done in that little spot right there that you see me working in, I've put a little ultramarine blue in there, and I'm just kind of wetting that area down, and in the end maybe that'll look like a little icy spot or an icy pond or an icy puddle. Just a little touch of something there. It's interesting because as you can see, we have very little white of the paper showing, but it's starting to sell itself as a winter scene, as snow. So you've done most of the heavy lifting here, as far as like painting the page. There's scenes I've seen where a lot of white is left behind, maybe 3/4 of the paper, and they're easy in the sense that you're just leaving a lot of white showing, but they're deceiving. They're not as easy as it looks. So hopefully this minimalistic approach gives you the encouragement to try something like this. And if you haven't already, check out our group on Facebook. We have the Ron Ranson group on Facebook. And this is a lot of what we do there. A lot of this is inspired by Ron's teachings. Minimalistic palette, large brush, and simple brush strokes, keeping things small details to make it fun and quick. So now I'm going to start putting in some trees here. You'll notice they're dark so that they contrast against the light in the sky. Do as much as I can with the brush. I've got a chiseled edge going, which basically I've flattened the hairs out on the brush to the point to where when I touch it against the paper, it's like a flat synthetic brush almost. But this is natural. This brush here is, and if you're not familiar with this is the Ron Ranson by Pro Art Company Hake, or again, Hake brush. This brush has natural goat hair. You can actually smell it once you wet the bristles. At this point, I'm taking a number 3 rigger, Winsor & Newton brush, and I'm just creating some inky paint, and I'm just sort of flicking these little branches in, following the trunk of the tree and just coming off with some nice branches. As I was saying about that brush, a lot of people have asked me, is there a difference? I've seen similar brushes at the hobby store. They're not that name brush. A lot of times those brushes are not trimmed on the edge. They shed a lot of hairs. I've used a lot of different brushes, and the better brushes I've used is the Ron Ranson brush. And also the brush that's decent is the one by Frank Clark, who's an awesome teacher. His videos are great. If you haven't found his yet, look him up. One of the best teachers out there. But he's got 2 sizes of that same goat hair brush. He's got a large and a baby goat hair brush, he calls it. And they're both good. It was my first brush, but once I got using the Ron Ranson goat hair brush, that's pretty much what I stuck with. I just wanted to stick with the same brush and use it every day until, I really got the hang of it. So I use that one, but sparingly, the Frank Clark brush. So over on the right here right now, what I'm doing is I'm just creating another tree off to the side, a little bit smaller. And just a little bit over here. In nature, things are not placed, really. So you have to sort of be careful. If you put 2 things on one side, 2 things on the other, I've been guilty of this many times. I've got sort of this left-right brain where I want a tree on one side and a tree on the other side. It's like I'm lining up furniture in my room. But things don't align that way, so it'll look kind of weird if you make things look too geometric. I mean, I've almost done it here if you look at the spacing of the trees. I think it's just human nature. So now I'm at the bottom, the base of these trees, I'm just sort of anchoring it to the ground. Little bit darker colors. Constantly going back to your palette, dipping into a variety of colors, into the blue, into the gray, into the, you know, by having a variety of colors on your brush, you can create a variety of colors on your paper that look very random. And you don't really want to mix your colors. Now, I work with sort of a semi-dry palette, so it's sort of sticky, gummy paint, the newer palette that I'm using here. So it's not 100% wet. I don't have to scrub the bristles as much. It's not 100% dry. It's not 100% liquid. So when I make up the colors, I don't sit there and mix them until they're a complete mix. Just enough, and I'll get the color. If I start to touch it against the paper and it's not right, I'll go back and I can kind of mix it a little bit more on the palette. But I don't really do a lot of mixing of colors, really. I combine a couple, but I don't mix them very thoroughly, if that makes sense. So now, as you can see, we have a nice contrast. We have the dark trees against the light. We have our hills in the background. We have our grasses still popping up because the snow isn't, of course, that deep. And now here I'm sort of creating some interesting little shadows in the snow. You can go with the sort of a purpley mix, like a alizarin crimson mixed with a little Payne's gray with a little ultramarine. It's something hit or miss. You're going to have to try. There's no real formula for it. You're looking for a shadow color. You don't want a shadow color that's just gray. You don't want a shadow color that's really just blue. It's sort of that purple, darker, bluish purple. And when it dries, it'll look just right, like a shadow. And especially for winter, because you have that cooler color. You can go more red with alizarin in the spring and summer shadows. In the winter, if you go more toward that purple, it'll sell the coolness of the painting. Back to my rigger brush, just doing some little details. I'm more or less taking my time with this one. If you're a beginner or someone who hasn't done a winter scene, again, I hope this encourages you to give it a try. I put off doing winter scenes for a long time. They're just, I don't know, there's something about them. They're just more challenging, I think. So I'm going to do a little fence back here, just something I decided to throw in. Needs a little something there. A little bit of a fence. Using the rigger brush. Some Payne's gray, ultramarine blue. I don't go straight Payne's. When it dries, it just looks a little too, almost just too dark. Just a little fence, so as you're coming in, you're coming across the snow, you hit the tree, bounce to the left, and you see the fence. Obviously, when you show someone a painting, the goal is to keep someone engaged with that painting as long as possible. So the light, I feel, pulls the viewer in. Oh, the light catches your eye. The light, dark contrast. Then you're like, brain is, what am I looking at? Taking my card here, by the way, and I'm just scraping in a little bit of a fence on this side in the dark areas. But once you come into the painting and you're looking for a path, is there an S curve? Is there something with an arch? Something that brings the viewer into and then bounce off from different objects. And the longer you can keep the viewer engaged with your painting, the more that person is connected to that painting. And if you're selling paintings, I think it does more to want that painting. So that's what it is. You're looking to make connections, and that's why a lot of things in your painting are connected. From the tree to the ground to the anchor to the cloud, and those things you're going back and forth, and it keeps you you keep going back to it, you know. In today's day and age with cell phones and people are constantly looking at other things and they have short attention spans, It's harder and harder to get someone to look at just like a single photo. But those that appreciate art will always do so, I think. So we're just popping in some of the final details here. I'm just doing little shadows coming off the fence posts. It's something that will sell the eye on, that the eye will be sort of fooled into thinking it's looking at an actual scene as opposed to something that was created. Anytime you put a man-made item or a man-made object into your painting, it raises the scrutiny level of that painting. When you put a person, an object, a building, there's so much detail in that the eye can immediately discern and look at it and say, I'm looking at something fake. And that's fine if you're doing an impression. Maybe it looks at it and it's trying to, like a puzzle, figure out, what am I seeing here? Do I like what I'm seeing? Is it pleasing? It's a puzzle type thing, which is what Impressionism, I think, does. It lets you fill in the blanks so that you stay engaged. So we're zooming in now. Here's my little birds I popped in like I always do with my pen. We can see the clouds, the light coming through. We left some little white bits in the back. And let's see what else here. We can see the bottom, how we've left some snow. And we have some shadows and enough grass popping through that white, I do believe, sells it as a nice winter scene. And here it is in my little frame. And that's it. I do hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and make yourselves a great day, everyone.